what we're going to cover today, we're going to do a basic overview, what are solutions. We're going to talk about managed versus unmanaged, what are the differences, some of the challenges, how to handle conflicts. And then the biggest piece I want you to take out of this is how to create your own lifecycle management. Application lifecycle management used to just be a side thought for developing our solutions. And in reality, we need to think of, as a developer, just because I'm not using custom code all the time, I really should have application lifecycle management as a forethought of how I'm building solutions and how I'm implementing. And I'll offer you some tips. So in the current world, what's happened is we've implemented more agile techniques into our process. We have more developers who are converting over to Power Platform, and they bring with them this DevOps mindset. They expect to have solution control. Also, line of business apps, because of Power Platform and the Dataverse, has increased the rate of change. They're able to implement a proof of concept in the matter of a week. And in a week, I can build a proof of concept for somebody and have it out there. And then I can't turn around and tell them it'll take them 3 months to build it. So the rate of change has really increased to keep up with. So pushing out updates, that's important now. And having that update experience be seamless. We don't want to interrupt production environments. We don't want to interrupt end users. And we don't want to impact the business. Some of the challenges in working with solutions that we come across: import timeouts. So we're going to import the solution, it times out. Solution layering and application. How do we know what functionality is displayed to the user based on the layers of solutions that exist? The merging configuration, what gets merged and how does the system determine what wins? Collisions is when you have two things that are worked on in two separate solutions. What happens when you have two different fixes going in for the same attribute or same feature, same component? Patching solutions used to be a way to go, but that is no longer. So patching is going away. So how do we handle updates? Deleting configurations. A big fear of mine when working with managed solutions was that I would push out a managed solution and be afraid that I left out something and it would get deleted. How do I know that things are getting deleted, and how do I control that? And then automation. Speaking of the DevOps mindset, what if we automated the solution deployment process? What if that was a matter of checking in, components to a source code, source safe, like DevOps has connects to Git repository, right? And then DevOps went through and automatically deployed my solution for me. That would be interesting, right? I wouldn't trust it right away, but it would take some testing. But it is possible. So here's some pitfalls we come across. We work with, when working with solutions, sometimes we have multiple solutions in a single dev instance. And this is common. I have this, and none of this is to point fingers. This is stuff that I do and I come across and make it difficult for managing solutions. So having multiple solutions in a single dev instance, that's common. You're going to have that, but it does create some difficulties when managing your solutions. Multiple solution publishers across solutions being developed. This is a big, you got to watch out for. So if you have solution publishers and you have multiple of them, you cannot combine components from one solution publisher into a solution from a different solution publisher. So if you create a field or a table inside one solution publisher, and then you want to push an update, you'd have to create a separate solution for those updates. You couldn't combine them. So it's something to watch out for down as you go. It's not something you want to have unless there's a real absolute need for it. Solution publishers really should be used to indicate the entity or organization that's doing the work, right? Not the individual. Other things that come up for pitfalls, having lack of good solution version control. So they're XML files. There's really when you export it, you can save the solution into a source control, but it doesn't source control the individual components. There was lack of solution segmentation. So if you don't break up what you put into a solution, that can really cause some issues. There's solution dependency. So version mismatch between environments. If you're not using proper lifecycle management where you're updating the version of your solution each time you promote it to higher environments, then that's going to cause you some problems. You're not going to know which fix is deployed. If every version is 1.0, then how do you know which one has what change in it? And then how do you undo those changes? The manual deployment of solutions is risky. And then deploying unmanaged solutions to production. Now, we all do this, but Microsoft has mentioned several times publicly that they want to move to managed solutions only in production. Now, how they would do this, I have no idea. But if they did, then you would be required to use managed solutions in production. And that would be difficult if you didn't have some sort of lifecycle management process or some way of working and understanding of what managed solutions do. So here's a little context. Maybe I should have started here. What are solutions, right? So solutions are just a zip file. They contain XML files that contain components that are changed. So when you create a field or modify a view, create a form, modify a form, those changes are contained inside the XML changes, the customizations. Every component has a node in the XML. The tool to package, there is a tool to package changes together. You can move changes from one environment to another, or solutions are the tool to package changes together. So you take all your changes and put them into one solution that exports as one zip file that has these several XML files in it. There's no point in source control, like I said, because you're not source controlling the individual components, you're just source controlling the one file. Well, saving that file in just a central safe place is just as good as doing the source control, because it exports with the name of the solution and the version number as the file name. And so that's really your form of control. And it's risky for developers to work on the same solution. So it's, beware. I've had some issues where if two people are working in the same solution, you can get some corruption going where one of the changes isn't saved or something like that. These are just examples of solution components. The data model can be in there, user interface, processes, other. Microsoft is continually making almost as much as they can possible about the Dataverse. Solution aware is what they call it. So solution aware, they mean capable of being put in a solution. Managed versus unmanaged. Managed was introduced in version 5.0. There's two main arguments against management: familiarity. I just want to do what I've always done. And then complexity. Managed solutions cause complexity and unintended dependency issues. So there's really, complexity could be mystery. I don't know how managed works all the time, and it has real hard set rules. So I avoid it, right? And that's what I did for years until I got tired of avoiding it and started using them and digging into them deeper. Unmanaged. So this is the app source code for dev purposes only. That's, according to Microsoft, is really only intended for dev environments. right? Customizations exist on top of the system and other managed solutions. So you have a layering that exists, and I'm going to dig deeper to that in a little bit. When you work in unmanaged solutions, it directly customizes the component. So there's no record of that change. It changes it right when you change it. Customization and components, but do not own them. They reference them. So what I mean by that is that an unmanaged solution just tells you what change was in that solution, but it doesn't own that change because the change happens at the moment of import. So the change is already done. Whereas a managed solution owns the change, and you can uninstall that managed solution and roll back that change. And so likewise for unmanaged, you can't delete or remove components if the solution is deleted. Managed is compiled code ready for deployment. If you got that DevOps mindset, it's compiled code is the idea. Unmanaged solution is exported as managed. So in your dev environment, you would take an unmanaged and you would export as managed. The identity of the solution cannot be modified. So once you import it to a new environment, no one can change the name of the solution or the publisher, any of the identifying marks for it. They cannot be added or removed. Components for a managed solution cannot be changed. So when you import a managed solution, no one can open that managed solution and remove components from it or add new components to it. That will always keep a solid record of what was changed in that managed solution. They create their own layer. And again, I'll show you this in a little bit here. I have a real good graphic. They're upgrade capable. So that means I can upgrade an existing managed solution. This is probably one of the biggest improvements that made me start using managed solutions is that previously upgrades didn't apply to the layer. So when we show the layering, you'll see last in goes on top. So it's sort of layers by order of import. You know, I import managed solution 1, and then I import managed solution 2. Managed solution 2 sits on top of managed solution 1. If I import an upgrade of managed solution 1, it sits on top of managed solution 2. And that really messes up the ordering of how configurations are visible. Microsoft made a change 2 years ago, I guess, and the upgrades go in line with where the managed solution sits in your layers. This will make sense in a little bit when I get to that visual. Managed solutions can be uninstalled, and then they can delete components they directly own. So if I deleted a component with a managed solution and I import that managed solution, it can delete that field for me that it owns. So layering, what is layering? The solution layering. Layering occurs on import when a component is changed within one or more solution. So when I change something and I import it on a managed solution, it adds a layer. There's a dependency chain of a component through each solution. So each component can be traced through each layer to see what it's been changed as. A layer is created when a component dependency is added or changed, or creation of a new component, or version of a solution. So that's how the layers get created. So if I'm putting in a new managed solution, it's going to create a new layer. Important, the layering controls application behavior. And application behavior, I'm saying as what the user sees. So we see here, I have a CDS solution, which is the common, well, it used to be common data service, but now is common data model, or otherwise known as Dataverse, or your default solution, right? So when you get a subscription and you create an environment, it loads a default solution. That default solution is your base solution. And then on top of that, it'll load sales, or it'll load field service or project operations or whatever, right? So solution A, managed, would be loaded on top of CDS solution. Solution B is loaded on top of solution A. Now solution C and D are unmanaged. They sit in the unmanaged layer. Notice they don't get their own independent layers. They sit in the top of configurations. And therefore, they sit in what's called the default solution. So the default solution doesn't sit at the bottom. Like CDS solution would be like a sales solution or field service or project service. I'm sorry if I caused confusion earlier, just talking about that. But your managed solutions sit at the bottom and your unmanaged layer sits at the top. So if I change a field in solution A and then solution D changes the same field, solution D is what the user sees because it trumps what's below it. So when dealing with unmanaged solutions, it's sort of a last in wins. You know, whatever you imported last that's the change that the user sees. And we have a couple other examples of this. So here's the solution layers. So in the system solution, that's the default solution. There's an entity and a sitemap. In the managed solution B, sitemap is edited. Unmanaged solution C, sitemap is edited. Unmanaged solution C wins. That's what the user sees. They wouldn't see what managed solution B contains, because the unmanaged customizations trump. So import order and dependencies will influence the layering. And then unmanaged solutions, again, we see they don't create their own layers. They all go into one unmanaged layer. When working with managed solutions, on import, you have the option, there's a checkbox in advanced settings that says you can override unmanaged customizations. What this does is it updates the managed solution layer. So it imports the managed solution as it is, as usual, but it applies the same updates to existing unmanaged customizations. So if I have a field on my managed solution, field A, and field A is also customized in the unmanaged layer, it removes that unmanaged layer's customization. So it's okay to do that, but you got to be careful because you could remove configuration or customization that you didn't want to remove. So you got to really know what you're doing there. I would be very careful of using that unless you specifically knew, okay, field A, I know exactly what's customized on it, right? Because it changes the behavior of the application. That's why it's risky. So something that we can do to help us when working with solutions is segmentation. This is introduced in version 8. It provides granular control. It's the functionality that allows you to add subcomponents to the tables when you add items to a solution. It's the concept of not adding everything into a solution. So you can either, you have two choices with segmentation. You can add all assets. So you add all the attributes, the forms, the relationships, the business, you add everything. But when you do that, let's say on a contact record, you're only working with the job title field. Segmentation would say, best practice, only add the job title field to the contact so that your solution only contains what you're changing. Old practice was add all assets, and you would add everything on the contact into the solution and then just change the job title. Well, the problem with that is you bring in unintended dependencies and you wind up modifying unintended assets. So that's why when you're working with a solution, you want to have the fewest amount of components as possible that only contain your changes. When do you use add all assets? Creation of a new table. You created a new table, add all assets. You need all that. Or deployment of a table to a new environment that does not have the previous version. So there is a purpose for adding all assets, but it's really just those two scenarios. So solution segmentation. Further down, adding the subcomponents. So this is where we add the individual assets that we're actually going to change. This provides granular control, prevents unintended modifications, and then there's the dependency check. So it can find dependencies. If they exist in the target, they can be ignored, right? So sometimes it'll say, you know, this relationship is dependent on the other table. Well, if the other table already exists in your higher environments, you can ignore that dependency. When to use, you would add subcomponents granularly at all times unless the other two scenarios, really, unless you're creating a new table or you're moving a new table into a new environment. But, you know, producing an update or working with unmanaged solutions, you know, I'm not saying here managed is the only way to go. I'm trying to give you an understanding of how solutions work so that whether you use unmanaged or managed, you find some best practices that'll save you some headaches in your solution creation. There's a checkbox when you're adding a table that says include entity metadata. The purpose of this, just for clarity, what this is doing is these are the settings for the table. So if you change the setting on the table, then you need to include the metadata in the solution. So you enabled audit, or you enabled mobile, or you enabled quick create forms, you know, those settings on the table, that's when you would need to create the metadata. You know, my recommendation is not to include it unless you've made a change. There's really no need. Because again, it just adds risk of making a modification that's unintended. What if you include the metadata on the contact table, what if another developer is working on another solution and they made a test change to that metadata, but it's not ready to go to a higher environment yet? You've just brought it in your solution. So that's where segmentation is really important. You know, that example is what we call a collision. So segmentation reduces collisions. It also reduces the size of your solution, so your import goes faster. It reduces complexity, and then, you know, improves import times. So how do we update a solution, right? So let's say I'm working with managed solutions. I make a decision, I'm going to use managed solutions. How do I make an update? What we have is a standard upgrade. So in this process, you would increment the version number. You would retain the unmanaged solution container, publisher name and version. You know, you would, because you're working in dev in an unmanaged solution, right? You've already promoted that solution to the higher environments, but you want to upgrade. You have some further changes that you need to make to the components that are already in the higher environments. For a standard, you can remove the unchanged components. So let's say we created a new table and we moved that to the test environment, table A. Now I need to adjust field B on table A. Well, I can go back to that unmanaged solution that has the whole table in it and remove everything that I'm not going to change and just have field B for table A in that unmanaged solution that has the same name, same publisher, same version, right? So you export that, and now it only contains the one change you wanted to do. And then import, and it will create a new layer directly above the previous layer, effectively replacing it. I know, this is crazy. What does this look like? This is what it looks like. Here we see step one. I imported a managed solution, solution A, and account number length equals 30, right? Solution B comes in, it's managed, so it creates a new layer above A, and the length is 50. The user sees up top length of 50. Now I want to do an update to solution A to make account number length 35. So here is that update highlighted in red. 1.0.0.1 has the length of 35. But the problem is solution B is still there with length of 50, so the user still only sees length of 50. But we see how the upgrade, when I imported it, replaced what I had. So another one is the in-place patch. So that was a standard upgrade that we did. So you can in-place upgrade, you reuse the solution container and version. So you edit the existing unmanaged solution. You can remove the unchanged components if you want. You export as managed, but you don't change the version. And then import the updated components in existing layer for solution. So when you import, it will go to the layer that the previous managed solution version is, and it overwrites it. So the problem is you can't uninstall those changes now because it just added those changes to the same layer. It doesn't recognize your last import as a separate event. Whereas previously we imported it and there's a version number change, I can uninstall that version number change. You can't if you don't change your version number. So it's a little dangerous there. Another option is you could amend the solution name. Not recommended. I don't even know why I have this slide. You could just change the solution name to denote the patch number, and then it creates a new managed layer on top of the managed stack. This creates deviations in app behavior due to the order of solutions, and then creating patches using the create patch button. So Microsoft had this create patch button. It's no longer supported. They're rolling that back. So that's creating patches is not a thing anymore. Here's what the patches look like. So solution A is imported, solution B is imported, and then solution A, notice they changed the name of the solution to A-P1. Well, the system, because the name's not the same, sees it as a whole different managed solution and puts it on top. And in this case, the user then sees length equals 35 because that's the top one wins. But that's not an upgrade to solution A. That's just another managed solution. So really the first scenario is how you upgrade a solution. What you do is you increment the version, you keep the name and the publisher, everything the same, you increment the version and you import that. That will recognize that it's already a solution and it'll put it at the right layer that your solution exists. That way your behavior will always be easy to determine because you know what layer your solution changes exist at. So there's a feature called stage for upgrade. What does the stage for upgrade do? Upgrade immediately upgrades the solution on import. So managed solution with higher version imported, layers directly above the previous. It'll layer right above the previous, and so it essentially replaces the previous solution version. And then it's used for upgrade as straightforward updates. No need to delete. You're just upgrading the solution. You just import it. That's a straight upgrade. When you select stage for upgrade, it imports it as a holding solution. It gives you the ability to delete components. So you have the ability to conduct data migration before applying the solution. Because when you stage for upgrade, it shows both changes. So let's say in my new solution, I deleted a field. I changed a field from an option set, or from a string to an option set. Well, if I just import that as upgrade, normal import, it's going to delete the field, and I'm going to lose the data in the string field. But if I stage for upgrade, it keeps the string field and it gives me my new option set field. So now I can perform a data migration from the string field to the option set field. Once I'm done, I can apply solution, and then it'll remove the other field and finish and put the solution in place. Plugins. So version 9 introduced some constraints on plugins. So new plugin types introduced are based on assembly version number. So this is very important. So now your assembly number, version number for your plugin must match, and it must be incremental. It will not allow you to import and update to a plugin that has a different assembly. So this goes back to improved source control in your development environments. It'll only do an update when a major or minor assembly version is changed. This avoids missing dependencies. So if one version is dependent on something else, it's going to make sure that it's an actual upgrade. And then it solves for import and deletion failures. So they've made some fixes that when you are importing and versioning, they've improved that process. So what do we do with all of this? We know we need to use subcomponents and segment our solutions so they're smaller. We know we need to manage versions more accurately. How do I know what fits for my organization? First, you got to determine the type of application you're creating. Then you've got to look at solution boundaries. What kind of boundaries need to be set when you're creating solutions? And then you need to create a repeatable and predictable deployment process. Well, what does that look like? Okay, so when we're talking application types, are you building a complete application, right? So maybe it depends on customer engagement. Maybe it's completely independent, but field service, project operations are examples of complete applications, right? Implementing sales is a complete application. Maybe you're doing a custom Power App on the Dataverse, but it's going to have 25 tables. It has 200 users on it, right? That's going to be a complete application. Are you building applications that C is just a part of? Combines an app with other services like IoT. So maybe you're just building an app to take a section of the customer engagement model and integrate it with something else, right? Are you just adding features, right? Maybe there's a simple vanilla import of sales and you're just adding a few features. You're augmenting the existing functionality. Or is it a task-based app, right? Where where the app is very simple, but it's very user experience focused and has a few business tasks, but you're just modifying a small data set, right? What do I mean by solution boundaries? So it really is dealing with your deployment model. Do you have a single instance, or are you dealing with multiple instances, right? And this is single environment or multiple environment, right? Do you just have production? Are you a small organization and you've just been making changes in your production environment directly? Well, then you're not importing solutions, so you're going to always be working in unmanaged solutions. But instead of editing the default solution, you could, if you're a single environment, you could create unmanaged solutions that structure your changes so you can easily find where you make changes. Will the app be deployed to multiple customers? So are you building something that's going to go on AppSource? You want to have managed solutions so that you can have control over the content of that solution. Will it be going to multiple regions? Regions can impact functionality that's available. Will the app be deployed to a single global instance, right? So are you just one, but there's several languages and several currencies in one environment? All of those things, impact it, right? Time independence. So time independence has to deal with when you're creating solutions, that's how you're packaging your changes together. Will you be working in such a fashion that you'll be moving changes at different timelines? Right? So is your development process having different iterative timelines? Will the app work if the behavior is split, right? So if you update sales and contacts, but you don't update opportunities, will the app still function okay? Is there a need or benefit of releasing subset of app behavior on a different cadence? So you got to think about your development lifecycle or your user expectation on changes. Are they coming to you every week asking for changes? Well, then you're going to need to really segment your solutions so that you can move those changes in smaller packages faster. So what we can do is we can create configuration of version control. So how do we do this? We enable the agile teams to deliver while minimize collisions by separating out solutions for them. So don't have everyone working in the same solution. When I get a ticket and it has a task on it to work to configure something inside the system, the first thing I need to know is what solution am I going to work in to work on that issue. And to do that, you need to know what your team structure is like. How much isolation from each other is needed? Do you need to service existing release while working on the next one? What if you need to provide a hot fix? Something broke, but you're in the middle of developing the next update. How do you provide that hot fix? Well, the answer would be a solution, right? You would create a solution that's specific to that managed solution. So how many environments? Everyone should be working with at least dev and prod at a minimum. You really want dev, test, and prod. You want a development environment for building your changes. You want a test environment for playing around and testing your changes, and then production for use by your users. Microsoft recommends a separate environment for each developer, 2 for each solution if you need, right? Like I don't go that far. I've seen it built out that far in very large projects. But that's a level of complexity I don't think most people want to get into. But really, you should have dev, test, and prod, right? With a single development instance, your deployment process goes from dev to test to prod. With multiple development instances, so I have some team members working in one instance, another team member working in another instance, and another instance, they could export from their instance and import to a centralized dev instance, right? So perhaps my team, if your team is large enough, and they could be working on different work streams, you would have a centralized dev instance where they combine their stuff, and then you export from that dev into test, right? Here's a sample of a solution deployment plan. So assignment comes first, user story and work item assigned in DevOps. Analysis and design comes next, where an architect would assess the level of effort, add appropriate release cadence. Is this sprint 1, sprint 2, whatever? Determines conflicts and dependencies within components being configured as part of this work items. So that means they would need to know, hey, you're working on the contact on the job title field. You need to know that job title field is dependent on these other fields or has requirements around it, right? Or you're customizing the code. You have JavaScript that runs on the opportunity form, and you're going to modify that code. Well, make sure to set the dependencies, because you can now set dependencies with web resources, that kind of stuff. And that should go into the DevOps ticket. And then configuration and development, the sprint or patches are collected into unmanaged solutions, each containing solution components. So that means I get my tickets and I create an unmanaged solution, and I add the work that I'm going to do into that unmanaged solution. And then in the DevOps ticket, I update what solution that work is a part of. And then the base solution for any solution is version 1.0. And then I would save that in an archived location once completed. That would be the basics of a manual solution deployment process, right? Here's links to the tools for automation. So through NuGet in Azure DevOps, in Visual Studio, you can get these tools. There's a solution packager, and what solution packager does, it extracts and packs solution zip files. So it allows you for source control to be used. So you can take the solution. So I get a ticket assigned to me. I go to my dev instance. I add the components that are part of that solution. I take that and use the solution packager to load it into source control, because it'll extract everything out into a file level. And then now I check out those pieces that I'm going to edit, and I modify them. And then the packager will package it back together into a solution, and I import that back into my environment. Configuration migration tool. This is on the XRM Toolbox as well. I believe it is. And this moves configurations between environments. So you can select pieces of a solution to move from one environment to another. Really granular, very useful. A lot of people live. I know other architects that live by that tool. The package deployer is cool because it can contain multiple solutions. It can contain reference data to load into a table, and it can contain custom code to sort of determine behavior and have some logic in it. So really powerful, the package deployer is. There's a UI automation test library using Easy Repro. So that's for creating automation testing or automated testing. the online management API, you can reset environments to known states, or you can restore environments to backup. That's an API call. What does that mean? That means you can automate the clearing of a dev environment. You can automate the cleansing of that, right? So I could deploy a solution and then go back to my dev environment and wipe it back to base, right? Solution management, it's solutions, build, test, deploy. Here's the levels of complexity. So single solution approach, manual export import, basic version control. That's level 1. One or more solutions is level 2. Well-defined solution boundaries, manual extraction, unpack of solution via solution packager, check into version control. Level 3 would be solution segmentation as practice, patching as practice, export and extraction via solution packager is automated, right? And level 4 is reusable common solution libraries are defined and refactored. So these are just levels, of complexity that you can move through. So where to start? First, come up with a process. What works for your team? You got to identify the process first. And then what tools do you need to make it easier, right? Are you dealing with multiple solutions being promoted each time? Well, the package deployer may be actually very helpful for you. Are you having problems with version control? Well, the solution packager could be very helpful to check in and out of source control. Because see, your source control unpacks each piece. And I'm almost done here. We'll get to the questions. Tips for unmanaged solutions. Keep your solution size small. Come up with a strong naming convention so that it's standard. I have one environment where I use the ticket number from the support desk ticket to indicate the solution name, right? Centralized solution control. Have someone oversee the deployment process. And then I recommend it for small environments, maybe for future releases if you're making feature updates, like if an organization is small enough and you're coming at changes on a rapid pace, well, then maybe working with unmanaged makes sense and is manageable for the rapid dev deployment. Managed, single publisher across environments, very key. When you start dealing with managed solutions, you got to make sure your publisher's right. Least number of solutions possible. Avoid multiple solutions modifying the same component. So when you're dealing with a managed solution environment, you want to have one solution that has all of your changes and you just work in that one solution. And then every time you export that one solution and move it from environment to environment. Yes, that solution gets big, but maybe after a year or after 6 months or after a project's over, you no longer use that and create a new solution. But you don't want a lot of solutions when dealing with managed solutions. You want to keep your number small. Merge only occurs for model-driven apps, forms, and sitemap. And what do I mean by merge? That means instead of a change overwriting, it merges the changes together and the system figures out what looks best. So it's hard to tell when something merges. So just remember, if you're moving model-driven apps, forms, or sitemap, you don't want to have sitemap in 5 managed solutions. You want to have it in one managed solution that you work with. Solution segmentation is key. And remember, top wins in managed solutions, right? When you're dealing with layers. And then in the presentation, there's links to where I got all this information, how to use these modules. These are great references.